Alrighty, there we go. So welcome to our CSS workshop. I'm Chris, I'm the president of MyHacks, and we're going to be doing this together today. I've made a repository where I've got two different versions of a site, one without the style sheet and one all finished with the style sheet. And so this way you don't have to focus on learning or working with the HTML. You can just focus on working with the CSS. I've already written the HTML for you. But the starter site, like without the CSS, looks pretty terrible. So we're gonna build the CSS together, and I'll talk about each of the parts along the way. The main points I want to cover today are some of the different kinds of selectors, how to determine the specificity of a selector, and also I'm going to show how to lay out your site using just like the standard float, and also I'm going to show Flexbox. Before we get started, you're going to need to actually clone my repository. So in order to do that, you just go on to, let me copy and paste this link into the chat. And here we go. So you go to this GitHub page and you're going to clone this repository. If you haven't done that before, just go to here, to this code download button, and then click the copy button, and then bring up a terminal instance. Can you see my terminal, or am I only sharing one screen?
I don't see the terminal. I think it's just the browser you have shared.
Okay. Let me fix that. Oh, there we go. There, now can you see my terminal?
Yep, all good.
Okay. So I'm gonna make a new directory. I'm just gonna call it workshop. And then I'm gonna go into that directory, workshop, and then I'm gonna do git clone, and then my project, and it's gonna pull it down, pull down this repository. I highly recommend that you do this workshop in Visual Studio Code, but any IDE where you can edit HTML and CSS is fine. And eventually it will clone. There we go. Okay. So let me bring up this, this workshop code then. So I'm gonna go open the folder I just made. And I made it in this workshop folder. And then I'm just gonna open this up. And you're gonna wanna go into I'll show you actually what both of them look like, what start and finish look like. So let me open this up. Cool. So I'll show you like first, what are we starting with? Now, you know that I'm the president of MyHacks, but also on the side, I'm the president of the Keanu Reeves fan club. So let me open up this site that I made. I'm using an extension like Open with Live Server. You can download that from the extension things. And I made this site to honor our favorite actor, Keanu Reeves. But as you can see, it is pretty bad right now. It's just like a bunch of jumbled images. I've got like this list here. It's all in Times New Roman. It is not very good. But don't worry, because we're going to transform it. We're going to add the necessary styles, and then let me open up another one. And this is what we want it to look like. This is our goal. So much better. We have this, like this image is floated over here. And then also, like if you're looking at it on a phone, you see how the text goes over. But like if you're looking at it on a phone, you want the image to take up the full width of the page. so that you can scroll through, and that just works much better. So this, all of this is done through CSS. I've also got this like hover drop shadow effect that is only on when your mouse pointer is hovered. All of that can be done through CSS. In order to do that, you can just open up that file, by the way, in Google Chrome. And every time you save, you have to refresh the page. But I have it where if I save, like, it automatically refreshes the page because I downloaded a VS Code extension live server. So if you want to download that, you can just go over to here to the marketplace, and you can search for that. I think it's called live server. Yeah, this live server extension. If you download this, you can right click on whatever HTML file you want to open, and it will automatically refresh the page every time you make a change and save. So it should just take a moment to download if you'd prefer to do that. But either way is fine. Just remember to refresh the page. Yes, thank you, Rob. The repository link is there. Please download and clone this repository. So we're going to start. We're going to be in this starter directory during this workshop, and we're going to build the style sheet from scratch. So let me again open this up. And so we have our ugly site to start. So first of all, I have all of this HTML already written for you and linked to the assets. And I've already written the classes that I think we're going to need. So just to give kind of a background, when you're building a site, you kind of have three main things that you're writing. You have HTML, you have CSS, and you have JavaScript. Those three different things kind of answer different questions about your site. The HTML is the content of your site. Like, what is your site? What text do you want to display? What images do you want to display? That's all handled in the HTML. The JavaScript handles the interaction of your site for the most part. So like if you want to have a button and a form that's interactive and you want it like some sort of connection to a server or like sign people up for an email list or something like that, or you want to make a game where you have people like dragging things around, that is written in, mostly is written in JavaScript. And then how you want your site to look. So not the content of your site, but how you want it to appear and how you want it styled, for instance, colors and fonts and borders and margins and the structure of your site and the layout. That question is answered through CSS. CSS stands for cascading style sheets. So what we're going to do is just make a blank file, a blank CSS file, and you can call it styles.css. Okay, and we'll just start with an empty file. And then let's start by trying to change the background color. So here we have like a white background, and we'd like to make it like a different color. And you can choose whichever color you like. By the way, you can style, like when I put in values, you can choose your own, but we'll start with styling the background. And there's a couple different ways to do this. One is we can use this star and then let me, I guess I should explain the structure of CSS a little bit, but let me just write this. So, and then I'll explain what's actually going on. And let's choose a color. If you're in VS Code, you get all of these predefined colors. I chose bisque, but what's actually happening here? So there's a couple different parts of this. One is the selector. This is a selector. This answers the question, what element on your site should this styling be applied to? So this is the universal selector. It will select every element on your site. The star, that means everything, select everything. And then underneath we have an attribute that we want to change. So here our attribute is background color. So for all the entire, for every element on our site, we want to change the background color to a given color. and we've passed in this bisque color, which is a predefined color. There's a set of predefined colors, but you can also do like RGB, and then you can put in like values here for RG and B, and actually VS Code will give you like this helpful thing that will help you pick the appropriate values. But we'll stick with a predefined value right now. So if we save this, and then now our site has changed, if we go to our site, nothing has happened. And the reason why is because our CSS file is not actually linked to our site yet. So you see, like we have this index.html. The browser doesn't know actually to go out and grab some styles. So let's go back to our HTML here. And in the head, we're going to have to add a link to our style sheet. And that's done with the link tag. So we're going to write link. And this takes in two attributes. It takes in one rel, and it takes in href. So the rel just says like, what is this document that you're linking? And we can just write style sheet so the browser knows how to handle it. And then href is the address of our style sheet. So you can see like, because they're in the same directory, we can just do styles, we can just do that. And because it's in the same directory, the browser will know to go and grab styles at CSS, but this could be like a link to some place on the internet. Like it does not matter as long as it points to the CSS file that you want to style your site. So if we save, now we go back, we see that it is this bisque color, the background of our site. I wanted to do this to demonstrate the universal selector, but you can also do body. And this will change the background color because everything on your site is inside of this body tag. So this is this contains all of your stuff. So the background of everything will be changed to bisque. So cool. So we changed our background color. And now if we look, we have like this ugly, this is like the first thing people are going to see is this, the official Keanu Reeves fan club heading. And just like Times New Roman, you know, is not doing it for me. Why would you ever want the universal selector versus body? I would say you probably would want to use body for changing like the background color because I think it's generally that's what I see. So because like you have the hierarchy of the page, it preserves like that hierarchical structure. The universal selector, and also by doing that, I'll show you, like if we go here, we have a specificity of 001, which I'll get into specificity in a second, but if you know what it is, the universal selector has a specificity of 000. So by using body, you still have specificity. Oh, can you hear me? Oh my gosh, my headphone's disconnected.
We can hear you.
Can you hear me now? Okay, well, I guess no headphones then. All right, so that explains why you would prefer to use body. Anyway, let me go back to, I'm sorry about my headphone troubles. Let me go back to, we want to style this header. And so let's go onto our page. Let's figure out what element this is. And if we look, the text was the Keanu Reeves fan, the official Keanu Reeves fan club. We can see that it is an H1. H1 is like heading level 1. So a section heading, and it's like the biggest heading. So we can, in our style sheet, style all of the H1s. And there's only one H1 in this, but we can write a style here for every single H1. So let's write an H1 as our selector. And then we want to change, I want to change the font, definitely. So we're going to write font family here. And the reason why you write a family is because you don't know what fonts are going to be on the target system. So you can select a list of several fonts, and it will tell the system, like, if Gill Sans isn't available, I want you to use Gill Sans MT. And if Gill Sans MT isn't available, I want you to use Calibri, and so on. Sego UI isn't there, I want you to use Tahoma, and so on. And last, you can also specify like sans serif and serif. Like if none of these fonts are available, at least use a serif or a sans serif or a monospace font. So I'll demonstrate like just using this default real quick, and you can see like now our heading font is changed, but I actually have a heading font that I have picked out that I know works. So I'm going to do Snell, round hand, and cursive. And if I do that, it creates this nice scripty, font. You can find a bunch of font families. VS Code will recommend some for you, but actually there's a site that I found really helpful. If you search like font families, it was, yeah, this w3.org has these like font families written out. Ooh, not this one. Generic font families. So you can have like different kinds of fonts. I think there's a newer version of this. This is the CSS2 version of this page. So I think if I go to CSS3, nope. Okay. Where was this site? Okay. Anyway, the point is you can pick out which fonts you like, but you should specify a font family so that they like, because what this will say is if you can't find this Snell roundhand font, use any cursive font. So I'd also like to change the color. And the color that I picked out when I was looking through, you see we have all of these different colors you can pick from. I chose Fire Brick. I just thought it looked really nice. And also I want to change the font size. And I'm gonna, Snell roundhand is like a Comic Sans type font. It seems no, what's happening is it's not Comic Sans, but because it's got this cursive at the end, it means that it will pick any cursive style font, and Comic Sans I think is a cursive style font. So it is failing as it is supposed to be because you don't have Snell roundhand on your system. But like you can pick a different font family then. But it's giving you still a cursive style font. And font size, I chose 3M. M is the size of one letter M on the screen. So like, because it's you have like different screen sizes, it's difficult to say like I want like so many pixels or something like that. Like yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what M stands for. I mean, I hope I'm not wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's like one print M on the page, and then you can multiply by the size of that print M on your page so that your whatever screen you're writing for, the size makes sense. Because if you do like a certain number of pixels, it might look good on your screen, but when you go to load it onto a phone, like 100 pixels on this laptop screen that I'm working on is different than 100 pixels on a phone. It's a much larger percent. You can also do percent or point, PT, but M works as well, EM. There's also REM, which is relative M. I don't understand yet what that does, but that does exist. So anyway, so this changes the size of the font, and now it's on mine, it is in this very nice cursive font that is installed in my system. If it's not installed in your system, it should fall back to a cursive style font. Cool. So now we have the heading, but we have like the images are all really, really huge. Or they're all different sizes also. And it's making it really actually hard to edit it because as much as I really like looking at Keanu's face, it is getting in the way of the rest of the content. So let's fix that real quick. I'm just gonna make, these are all image img tags. Let's find an example. Yeah, see, these are all img tags. So let's just style these real quick so that they're all a much smaller size. So I'm just going to do as a selector, img, that's our selector, and I'm going to use, I'm going to put in the width, so the width of the photo, and I'm going to choose 15M. And if I save that, much better. Okay, so this is now more manageable. The images are not crowding out the text. And yeah, much better. So now what I'd like to do is I'll real quick style these level 2 headings because that just seems like the next thing in the tree that needs to be styled. So I can do it the same as the previous one. I just put in the element h2. So I'm in all of these, I'm choosing the element that I want. That's it. And you can see like VS Code is telling me this will select everything in an image tag. This will select everything in an H1 tag. So now for my H2, I want to change the color. I liked this color cadet blue, and I want to make the font family. I'm going to choose this impact font family, and VS Code is very helpfully filling in the rest of it. And again, what this is saying is choose impact first, then however you say this one next, and then Arial narrow bold next, and then you can't find anything, do a sans serif font. Cool. And let's see how this looks. So much better. So we have this like nice color, and it's like a very bold font, which is nice. Oh gosh, I'm in the library, so it's
UCF
gonna.
libraries would like to remind you to please keep your facial coverings on at all times and to remain 6 feet apart from other individuals. Remember, staying apart allows us to stay open. Thank you for your cooperation.
Yeah. All right. Please wear your mask, everybody. Very important. I have a class immediately before this, so that's why I pick a study room in the library. Okay, so we were at choosing H2. All right, so let's see. The next thing I want to do is I want to style the like. I want to style the text because again, this is in like a Times New Roman, kind of not very good looking stuff, and all of these are inside of p tags. I know this p is for paragraph, so let's real quick style those. Again, we're selecting at the element level, and I want to pick a color. I did a custom color for this one. I want to demonstrate you can call functions inside of CSS that are CSS functions. So there are a list of CSS functions that you can choose from. And I chose this 108, 107, 109. It's sort of this like grayish color. And you can see like now it's like a gray or like a softer gray. And there's a set of functions. If we go, we can look at, by the way, it's really impossible to know all of the things that are in CSS. There's so many selectors. There's so many attributes. So MDN, Mozilla Developer Network, has a lot of these listed. So if I go here to CSS functions, I can see like all of the different kinds of functions that are available. So like if I go down, we can find RGB, but there's like a grayscale function. So all of these are available for calculating values when like it would be a real pain to, you can also put in a like hex color value and use like your own color picker. But like if you know the RGB value, you can put that in. If you want to make a calculation, you can do that. Like there's all of these functions that are available. But the one that I mainly use is RGB. But do take the time to kind of look through what's available to you. I also want to point out that like there's so many CSS selectors. I've only gone over one yet, but if we just search CSS selectors on MDN, that is the CSS selector again is what we're typing here. It is selecting on which elements the style that you're putting here should be applied. So like there's some of the basic ones, like I mentioned, the universal selector, and you can select like on a element name, and you can select on a class name and an ID, which I will demonstrate. But there are so many. I want to say like hundreds of selectors, and they keep changing. Like if we go to the level 3 selectors, which was the most recent selector like specification, there's really hundreds of selectors that are available. Yeah, see, these are all of the selectors available in the CSS3 standard. Okay. Or hundreds of attributes. There's less selectors, but there's hundreds of attributes, definitely. Let me show like the attribute selector, or the attributes that are available. I mean properties, yeah. You can see like this is like an alphabetized list of all of the properties that you can change, and there are hundreds of these that you can choose from. So everything from like the border top and like the color and the sizes of things, all of these are available. MDN is a really great resource for finding what you're looking for. So let's go back to styling the paragraph. And I want to choose the font family. I chose this Sego. What? Oh, I didn't put a, there we go. Make sure to put a semi there, semicolon. Yes, and I want to choose this font family here, and that will style in like this sans serif font, all of our stuff, except for here. This did not get selected because these are not p tags, these are list items. These are li, list items. If we go into our code, our HTML, you can see that these are different list items. So let me style those real quick. I'm also going to demonstrate. You can, if you put a comma here, you can put more than one selector. And I'm going to demonstrate this parent-child selector. So, and I'm going to say for every list item that is inside of an ordered list, you can select on it. So every list item that is the child of an ordered list, you can select on. And this is for our page pretty much the same because there are no list items that are not in an ordered list. But let's say you had like list items that were bullet points that they are inside of an unordered list. You could specify like saying only the list items that are in an ordered list, I want this style applied to. The unordered list items, I don't want this style applied to. So let's see, and you can see now that these list items have been appropriately styled. Yes, Rob, the comma means apply this to both, or apply this to multiple. So like it's a way to separate the selectors, but to like continue writing on the same style. Next thing I was working on, I was like, it'd be really cool if we could get this like these first letters here to be like, in a fancy book, there's like the big cursive letter. It's called a drop capital, and like it takes up a few lines. You can actually do this pretty easily. So using another kind of selector, and let me show that real quick, and then I'll get onto some of the class selectors. But this is called a pseudo class here, and I'm just saying, right, that I want to get for every paragraph tag, I want to get the first letter of, I want to style the first letter of that. And so this is like a class that's applied by the browser, but you don't have to write yourself. So I'm gonna say I want the color to be the same color. I want to make it that that like the same cursive as our top part. So I'll make it the same color, and I'll do the font family again. Is this Snell round hand? And if that doesn't work, cursive. And then I want to apply, so let's see what that looks like. And so it's like small, but now it's a different color. And you see it's selecting only the first letter of these paragraph tags because we have this, it's called a pseudo class. So this is like the browser is actually figuring out what things it should be applied to, what class, like where to apply the class. We don't actually have to do that. I'm gonna make the font size bigger. So I'm gonna make it 40 pixels, and I'm going to add, I'm gonna make the line height bigger. So I'm gonna make that 25 pixels. And I'm going to add some padding. Let's add 4 pixels and padding to the left. Padding is space. It is blank space, by the way. So it is space in between one element and another element. So the padding on the right, which is padding between the letter and the next letter, it's going to need some space to breathe because you can see it's like cramped up on those other letters. So we need to change that. And so now we have like the drop cap sort of, but it's like, it's still on its same line. So we're going to add in another attribute called float. And I'm going to say float left, as in float to the left part of the page. If we add that, now it's actually how we would expect. It's taking up space on the separate lines. And it looks like padding, ooh, I meant to put padding right, not padding left. So if I fix that, now this looks much nicer. This is like the cool drop cap look. Cool, so this is a pseudo class, and there's so many different, like in the MDN, if you search for pseudo classes, there's all sorts of these selectors that have been, these pseudo classes that have been defined for you, and you can look them up, but this is one of them. So now I want to get into actually working with some of the classes that we made. So the first one I want to do is, in his top 10 movies, I want to make the movies where he won an award, I want to color them gold. So like The Matrix won an award. He hasn't won any like Academy Awards or anything like that, but he won some like this one like a Blockbuster award back when Blockbuster existed. But anyway, it's the Oscars of the Blockbuster. So let's still highlight it. So I've gone in our HTML, and in those list items where he did win an award, I added this class called award. So let's actually style that class. And how we style a class is by writing period and then the name of the class, so award. And then we say, that's saying like every element that this class has been applied to, I want to add award to it. So, and I just did color and goldenrod to that. And if we go back, now the movies he won awards for are styled and they have a gold color, so that to indicate that he won an award. But you might be wondering like, well, how, because we've already styled the text color in the list item one, and then we're styling the text color again in the class. How does the browser decide between style, like, should it apply the gray because it's a list item, because it's an element, or should it apply the gold color because we made it a class? You see these two styles are conflicting. Rob suggests mind reading, but it's actually much easier than that. The browser is not reading your mind. Actually, all of these different things have what is called a specificity. Um, and this is where the cascading part of cascading style sheets comes into play, because it is applying styles in the order of most general to most specific. So kind of intuitively, we can think maybe that like a class is more specific than a list item, because like a list item just defines like some sort of content, but a class is something we explicitly apply to apply some sort of style. So actually the browser is computing these specificity values. There's rules behind specificity. And if you look at like, if you hover over it in VS Code, you can see like VS Code is very helpfully telling us what this selector specificity is. And it's these three like values here, but these correspond to some sort of point values. So for all of our elements, in order to determine the style, the browser is actually adding up a score for each of these different styles. So and actually like our element selectors are less specific than like our class selectors. So how is this actually computing it? And you can see that like here, it's got this three element like tuple. So what's actually happening is it's calculating this tuple based on three things. So for every ID selector that you're using, that adds a certain point value. And then, so this first number is the total number of ID selectors that you have on a style. And then the next one is the total number of class selectors that you have on a style. And then the third number is the number of element selectors that you have on a style. So for like something like P up here, you can see it's 0, 0, 1. There's only one element selector that's selecting on the style, and it's an element selector. But that, if we're thinking like, oh, well, if it's a score, we're just adding these up, that wouldn't really make sense, because like, does that mean that if you have like, more than one element selector, like here you have more than one element selector, does that override a class selector? Like, shouldn't this one then be more specific than this one, because this one has 1 point and this one has 2 points? And the answer is no. Clearly, the class is more specific than like this element selector that we have here. So these have different multipliers attached to them, and then the browser adds it up. So the answer is, to come up with the actual specificity that the browser is using, is like for every ID selector, you multiply by 100 points. And then for every class selector, you multiply by 10 points. And then for every element selector, you multiply by 1 point. And then you add those together, and then that gives you your specificity for your selector. So that's why this class here is more specific than this selector involving two elements, because the point value for this is just 2 times 1, but the point value for this is 10 times 1. So this wins more points, and so this selector is applied. Are there any questions about that? That's how it decides when you have the cascade, because that way, like if there's something special, like we defined what we wanted broadly for all of our list items, but then we said for these specific list items, we want a different rule. This is how it's deciding which one to apply. And if we go into our developer tools, we can see like if we go here, styles, sorry. Oops. You can see that this style here has been crossed out and that this style is being applied. Also, just so you know, like if you want to mess around with your CSS, like you can try different things in Chrome developer tools, and you see I'm changing the color. Maybe it would be better if I did this. And over in my actual material, it's changing it for me. It's not actually changing it in the file, but it's changing how it's rendered. So if you want to see how something looks different, if you were to change some CSS, you can actually do that in the Chrome developer tools, which is pretty cool. Let's refresh this because we don't want that. So the more specific, the higher the priority. Yes, that is correct. And there is also this important tag that you can add that will make it so that like whatever specificity, like this is the one that you're going to do. It's like so many points. It's like 10,000 points or something like that, like a crazy amount of points. It can never be exceeded. Yes, the more specific, the higher the priority when putting it as the style. What if multiple directors are important? I think what happens is because important actually does have a point value associated with it, then if multiple directives are important, it will still add up the points for the different styles, and it will find the one that has the most points. So if multiple directives are important and they're conflicting with each other, then it will still add up the rest of the points, and whichever one has more points will be put as most select. Okay, cool. So I demonstrated then how we would interact with a class. I also want to move this Keanu photo because it's like taking up space here, but it's really small. I'd really like it if we could move it like over here, you know, if it could be in this part of the screen, that would be much better. And then the text could kind of wrap around it. So what I'm going to do is in our code, if you go, like you can see I've made a div where I have like this class Keanu about photo. And so that these two, the image and the header underneath that says Keanu's name, can be treated as one item for the purposes of styling. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a class selector for the Keanu about photo. And then down here, I'm going to add in float right, and I'm going to add in padding 1em. And float right is going to, just like float left, made it so that things wrapped around on the left and the item was on the left. Float right will do the same thing, but it will be on the right side of the screen, and it will flow the rest of the material around it. So you see this is now floated over here, and all of this material wraps around, and you know, if we move it in, it will wrap around like as if it were an image in a book, which is pretty cool. So that's what I wanted to do with that. There's a couple of, there's one other thing so far. This Keanu Reeves name right here, I really like it to be centered under him, under his photo. And I want to demonstrate how to select using an ID. So I have this ID name here, this element H4 with an ID name. I would recommend avoiding styling using IDs, but I will still demonstrate it here. You need to make sure if you're using an ID, it has to be unique in the entire HTML document. You cannot have different elements. Like if I put ID equals name here, this is bad. And the problem is like the browser will still render it and the CSS will still be applied, but it was bad for JavaScript because JavaScript has a function called like get element by ID, and if you have multiple elements with the ID, that's like which one do you get? Like the assumption with ID is only one element will have that ID. So I recommend avoid using IDs for styling because you can only apply the style to one thing. And then later on, if you want to apply that style to multiple things, you have to turn it into a class. So, but still, I'll demonstrate how to do that. So in order to style by an ID, in order to select an ID, you use the #, so name. And then we'll go here and we're just going to do text align center. Back. Now Keanu Reeves appears very nicely underneath of the photo. Awesome. So this is all of the style that I wanted to add. But there's still some stuff I'd like to do. So like this top part of the site is now appropriately styled and the layout is nice. But you see here, like we have these photos and they're kind of like jumbled together. They're not really like, if I like they're all to one side. It's not, doesn't really look good. It looks really unprofessional. Let me see if I think there was a question in the chat. Let me check real quick. Yeah, yes, if you do float left, it should still fit or fill around it. So I want to demonstrate another CSS technique called Flexbox. Flexbox is used to deal with, like, when you have many items, to deal with their arrangement on the page. And it does this in like a really clean way. Because like what I'd like to do is have all of these be in a row, and I'd like these, like the images to like be centered on a center line, like vertically, and so that they're not like, you see like this one is top is here and this one is top is here, and because they're all different sizes, like their tops are in different places. I'd really like it if this part could be filled out across the bottom here, and they could have like sort of an even amount of space around them, and if they all could be centered vertically. This used to be really difficult, but with Flexbox, it's become much easier. 1 second. So the idea with Flexbox is that we have we have a container class. We have this div container, and then we also have items. And we're going to define the rules for our Flexbox in the container. So let's see. One thing, real quick, I'm going to define this big picture class, and also you see that we can apply multiple classes to the same tag. But I want to make the pictures bigger, so that the problem is better illustrated. So I'm just going to do big picture, and oops, and I'm going to make the size 20M. So width 20M. There we go, that's better. To make the pictures bigger. So the idea is that there is a container and there are items. So you see, I have this class photos container, and I'll use this class to define the rules for the container, and then I can access the items too. So let's start defining the rules for the container. So in order to use Flexbox, the first thing you need to do is do display flex. If you save that, you see like now these items are in a Flexbox, but they're all sized weird, right? They got like resized in order to fit into the Flexbox. So we don't want that. Ideally, what I'd like is for them all to have like their original size, but then to be floating in space. So in order to fix this problem, we're going to add an attribute called align items, and we're going to say center. So if we do that, now they're the appropriate size, and they're like floating vertically. They're aligned vertically. Before this, it was like really difficult to align things vertically on a page. but now like these are aligned very neatly vertically, which is what we wanted. So another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to define, by the way, there are different attributes for align items. You can put in, you can have them stretch, which is like when they were stretched vertically. Like I'll do stretch just to show you. And you can see this is how it was originally, which I don't really want. But like, let's say you had something that you just had like boxes with color in them and you wanted them to be the same size, then stretch might be an appropriate thing to use. But for our purposes, since we have images, we want them to be centered. Another thing we can define is how do we want the Flexbox to be arranged? Do we want them to be in a row or do we want them to be in a column? So in order to do that, we're going to use this flex direction attribute. And just so I can show you, let's see what column looks like. And you see now they're like aligned in this column and they're centered on the page and they're centered with each other. So they have the same center line. But I would prefer them to be row. I would prefer them to be row so that they're aligned this way. Another thing you can do is you can do row or column reverse. What that will do is it will reverse the order of the items on the page, which is kind of cool. Like for my personal site, like I have this thing where I have an image and I had text, and how I arranged them in my HTML, it was in React, but how I had them arranged, I looked at it and like it was the opposite kind of what I wanted. I decided that it looked better to have it flipped and have the image on one side and the text on the other. Because it was in a Flexbox, I could just write row reverse, and without changing my HTML, the CSS rearranged the items. So let's go back to row. Another thing that I want to add, I want to tell it how to deal with the items because I want it, like these items are different sizes, and also like if my screen were bigger, I would want to tell it like, I have this space over here. If I had a bigger screen, like there might be even more space, but if I want them to actually be arranged to fill the space. So what I can do here is I can put space around, and that will make it so that there's the space here is divided between them. You can also do space evenly. And what this will do, it'll do something, actually quite similar. The difference is it deals with the space on these margins. I'm pretty sure it deals with those differently. Because we can do space between, and then you see it has less space on these margins. It's a little bit hard to see because I have a smaller screen, but it's dealing with the space along these margins differently. Whereas if we have space around, it will leave more space on these margins. Lastly, what I want to do is I want to tell it how to deal with if it runs out of space. So like if I have it like this, right now it's like decreasing the space and then it's not wrapping. But what I would like it to do is I would like the page to get longer and I would like to be able to scroll down and see all of the photos. So what I can do is I can add an attribute called flex wrap. And I can say right now it's on no wrap, but I would like to have it be wrap. And if I do that and I go back, now if I make this smaller, it will actually wrap the images appropriately so that all of them are visible and like the Flexbox is still, the order is still the same, like 1, 2, 3, 4. And it makes your content responsive. That means that no matter the size of the screen, the content will still be displayed in a readable way. So I've defined kind of how I want my container to treat the items. You can also apply some attributes to the items. And two that I'm going to talk about are the order attribute and the align self attribute. So let me first talk about the align self attribute. Let's say there's one photo. I have these all on a center line. And here I had them like align. I have this align items attribute and I'm saying center. But let's say for one of them, like I would really like it if this photo actually were aligned differently. I don't want this on the center line. I can override that by having a style specifically in that item. So what I'm going to do is I've already made a class for this just because I knew I was going to talk about it, but I made a class called on the bottom. And so this is a class in one of these items in our Flexbox. So let me define the style for on the bottom. I can pass in an attribute align self, and I can say, like, instead of doing that, I actually want to have it be aligned to the flex end. And you see now, like this is on the bottom, the same with this other key on the image. It'll be more illustrative maybe if I say stretch, if I want this to actually take up the entire height. And you see now that this image has been distorted so that it's the same height. It's the entire height of the Flexbox. So whereas these ones are aligned to the center, this one's aligned to the center, this one's been distorted so that it fits it's as if it were given the align stretch by the container. But and if I could also do flex start here. And there's several different attributes, and now it's on the top here. It's start aligns with the start of the Flexbox. But let me do flex end because I called this class on the bottom. So now it's down there. Okay. So another thing you can do is you can align the order. And one thing I'd like to do is I want to rearrange. I've decided that like I want this star, like I really want the Keanu image to be like the first image because he looks so good in this picture, doesn't he? So I want that to be really the first thing that you see. So I can reorder these. I can override the ordering in the Flexbox without changing the order of the tags in the document. So I can do that using the order attribute, and I'm also going to demonstrate another pseudo class. So I'm going to do photos container, and I'm going to use this nth child function. And so I want to get the first child, which is this star, and I want to tell it to go in a different spot. So I'm going to give it order 2. And if I go back, it ended up moving it over here. And the reason why is because these all still have the same order value and they have like higher priority. These all have an order value of 0 because we didn't give them explicit order values. So 0 is greater than 2. I'm sorry, 0 is less than 2. So it ends up, this has a lesser place in the ordering. But we can define orders. Like I said, I want this one, which was originally the third child, to it is still the third child. I want it to be the first thing that you see. So let me do photos container nth child. So let me define it for that one real quick. It is the third child and I want its order to be 1. And then let me real quick define something for the other ones. So nth child, I want to get the second child and I want it to be, I already did 1 and 2, so we'll just say I want order to be 3. And then photos container nth child 4, I want it to be last. So you can also put any order. Like if I put 10 here, even though there's not 10 items, it'll get me last. And this is what I wanted, right? I wanted first image in the list to be this great image of Keanu Reeves, and then I wanted to show off his Hollywood star, and then I wanted to have these because like there's other people in them. So we can reorder using the Flexbox attributes. We can just have an attribute on the different children. This also demonstrates like this cool another pseudo class where we can select the number of the child that we want to that we want the attribute to be applied to. Let me see. I saw there was a question or comment. I have a lot of extra space on my screen. Oh, okay. Okay, so that demonstrates Flexbox. I also wanted to, let's see, is there anything I'm forgetting before I move on? Are there any questions at this point, by the way? The pictures aren't reordering, I'm not sure why. Make sure that that you've given an order to each one, because if you don't do that, then the default ordering, like unless you set the order to 0, but then it's still competing with all the other items. That might fix your issue, Nathaniel. What's the difference between the single colon and the double colon? I do not know, actually. I just know that if I use double colon, does it still work? No. I don't know. That's a good question. Yeah. Make sure to include the space and the colon. I haven't looked into that. I don't know why. That is a question for MDN. Okay. The next thing I wanted to show is, let me make sure I'm not missing anything, but the next thing I wanted to show is this, like, I wanted to show how you can use CSS to add some interaction to your page as far as the styles are concerned. So you can't add like you cannot add like interaction in terms of like a backend or something, but you can add animations and things like that to your site just in CSS. So I wanted to add a drop shadow here that happens when you hover over his picture. So I'm gonna add a selector here. Remember that I put this photo thing inside of a div here with the class Keanu about photo. So I'm going to select that again. And I'm going to add on an inheritance selector. So this is saying or a parent-child selector. So like for any item that has this element class that has this class Keanu about photo, I want to get a child, and I want to get a child that is an image that is an image element, and I'm going to add this hover select pseudo selector. I'm sorry, pseudo class. So if I add that on, this means that this style will be applied to an image tag that is the child of an element that has the class Keanu about photo when that image tag is hovered over. When that item is hovered over. And I'm going to add in the filter attribute, and I'm going to use another function, drop shadow. And I'm going to pass in some attributes. This just defines like the size of the drop shadow and also the color of the drop shadow. I'm going to use gray. And if I save that, if I hover over, now he has like a drop shadow that appears when I hover over his image, which is pretty cool. We've just added in some interaction into our page without writing any JavaScript. Oh, okay, I'm glad you figured it out, Nathaniel. Cool, so now we've added in that interaction. One more thing I wanted to do is that, like, if you make this like really small, like let's say we were opening this on a phone, it looks really bad, honestly, when like all of this text here is like really cramped up against his image because we still have that float tag. And what I'd really like is for like, if this screen is small enough that you're viewing it on a phone or something like that, I'd like to make it so that his image isn't floated to the right anymore. It gets popped up and it takes the entire width of the screen. So that way, because if you're looking at it on a phone, you would get like the heading of the site, and then you would see Keanu's image, and then you would scroll down until you got to the about Keanu Reeves part. This is something we can do in CSS too. It's really cool that we can add responsive layouts in CSS. Responsive meaning that the layout changes depending on the size of the screen that you're viewing it on. We can do this in CSS using media queries, which is a feature that allows you to change the style depending on the machine that's running it, like the attributes of whatever you're using to view the page, the attributes of the browser. Like screen size is one thing that we can select on. So in order to use a media query, we have to do something a little bit different. We have to put in @media. And in order to use a media query, we need to tell it like what is the thing that we want to do the query on. So I'm going to use this keyword only and say screen. This means that I only want this media query to be called on a device where the user is viewing the page using a screen. You might say, well, that's all devices. Not true. A user might be viewing your content through a screen reader, and so they might be hearing your content, or a user might be viewing your content like in order to print. They might be in the print preview, and like the printer might be viewing your content. So that's how you can make these like nice, like if you're on a news site, you can use media queries to determine if the user is trying to print your page, and you can style accordingly so that it's, you know, you make the image like bigger and you get rid of videos, for instance, might be something good. It also means that by putting this only keyword in, it means that this media query will only be called on browsers that support media queries. So if you have an older browser, it means that this media query will not be used on it. So if the user is using a screen and if the max width of their screen is 600, I'm sorry, if this media query will only be executed if their screen is 600 pixels or less. It is a little bit confusing, the syntax, but this style will only be applied. This style is only applied to screens of size 600 pixels or less in width. And so I'm going to edit some of the selectors that or some of the stylings that I already made. And so for the Keanu About Photo class, I want to not have it float. I want to have it centered on the screen. So I'm going to put float is none. And so let's look at what happens. So if I resize this now, and I get to less than 600 pixels, you can see that like before he was floated to the right, and now he's like floated, he's not floated at all. He's taking up the space of the text. But we really like it so that he's like centered and taking up all of the space and like looks really good on a mobile device. So let's edit these styles a little bit. I want to select the image tag inside of Keanu About Photo. So remember, we can do this to select a child of an element with this class. So I'm going to do image, say, oops, img, saying that I want an image tag as the element that is the child of a element with Keanu About Photo as a class. And I'm going to say margin auto, meaning figure out I'm going to let the browser figure out the margin so that everything, so it's even on all sides. And I'm going to make the width 100% of the screen. So if I go back to the site and I reduce the size here, you can see that now he takes up the full size of the screen, and this would look really good if you were on a phone because you would like see his picture and then you would scroll through the content. The other thing is I'd like to make the font size of his name bigger. And you remember I said don't style on an ID, but we already started styling on an ID, so I'm going to do it again. I'm just going to override the font size, and I'm going to say 2M. Now his name has been made bigger, and he takes up the full size of the screen. So if we were to look at this site on a phone, then he would be like styled appropriately and all of the text would appear underneath. And this is responsive design, meaning that the design of the site adjusts depending on the device that you're viewing it in. And actually, if we go again into the Chrome debugger, we can pull this up on a simulation of a smartphone. Toggle device toolbar, and I have responsive, but like if I'm curious, like how would this look on an iPhone? I can, oh, because iPhones are more than 600 pixels in size. I have to find something that doesn't have that many pixels. Well, I don't know why. I don't know why it's not doing that. Whoops. Huh. Maybe it's just not, the sizes of the devices are too big. Maybe if I make this bigger or smaller, it would change it. But adjusting that, you could get it to work better on mobile devices. Are there any questions? Oh, Rob, commas are not a thing evidently in CSS functions. No. To answer your question, let me see if I can fix this. I guess I would want it to be, the max width is larger than that. I can't imagine if it's more than that. Huh. Okay. Well, I'll leave that as an exercise to the reader. Yeah, I think they use some sort of non-standard resolution. You could put in a size too. Also, that might be better for this situation. You could, instead of using pixels, you can put in a size. Like I think you can even use like, I wonder. I think you put inches, but whatever. Yeah. Anyway, I will leave it there. Are there any questions? Yes, please make sure to fill out the feedback form. Let's go to nighthacks.org/feedback. I will stop the recording here.